I'll live and die on this one. The biggest myth is you cannot scale a product that doesn't have a specific gross margin out of the gate. Meaning you can't go in with a negative and hope to get the volumes. You can't start in CPG, you want to have a 60% gross margin. And if you do that, you should be okay. Anything below that, it's going to get a little dicey. 50, okay, maybe 40. You're in the 30s and you're hoping to get it with volume, you're probably not going to get there.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Gary Plassmeyer or Mir. I'm sure I slaughtered it, but that's close I'm gonna get.
Pretty good.
Gary's
Good
gonna
enough.
talk. Gary's going to talk a little bit about brand positioning and entrepreneurial mindfulness and networking, and how to get those initial sales contacts, and discerning potential teammates and employees, and going through a lot of those, and looking or having a great discussion along the way. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Gary.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. First time was great, so obviously I'm back for more.
Absolutely. And just as a quick reminder to the audience, so Gary was on our sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So if you haven't had a chance to go catch his episode there, definitely invite you to do so. But for those in the audience that haven't had a chance yet to catch that episode, give everybody a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, so Gary Plassmeyer, I am just like Devin here. I am a serial entrepreneur, founded a couple brands, grew them, exited a couple brands, working on one currently in the baking industry, and then also helping with fractional sales and consulting in any way we can.
Awesome. Well, definitely a fun background, and a lot of great experiences. And so maybe to kick things off, I think one of the things that people realize, but oftentimes still realize that they need, but or struggle with, is how to get brand positioning. So in other words, everybody knows you need to get your name out there. People need to know what it is, but it's a lot easier said than done. So in other words, yeah, I know I need to get people to know who I am, but how do I do that? So walk us through a little bit your thoughts on kind of, as you're looking to position a brand, kind of what are the ways, if you're a startup or a small business, that you start to go about doing that?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, depending on what industry you're in, you want to figure out who you want to be speaking to, long term, who the customer is, who the consumer is, who your ideal target's going to be, so you can formulate your positioning around that. And then, a lot of what I did, at least because I came from the restaurant space where I was not an entrepreneur to being an entrepreneur over the last 15 years, was just networking as much as possible, and getting around as many people who have done that type of work and understand it at a higher level. So you can lean into their expertise, because we don't have there's not enough time to make all the mistakes, right, at the end of the day. So the more people you can plug yourself into with that journey, the better. Obviously, figuring out the analytics that are in your market. I know it can be a lot of entrepreneurs, at least I don't know, this is what I've seen, Devin. I'm not sure. You probably talked to a lot more entrepreneurs than I have at this point. They don't lean into the data. They go, they run, they like, oh, I got a different product. I feel like I have some market fit, and they just start running. They don't take the time to spend a little bit of extra money, 5, 10 grand on that data. In the food industry, it's Spins, it's Circana, and IRI got purchased by Circana, and then there's another one. Mintel. Spending the money on that stuff, it helps position you in the market. So when you do go out and start having conversations with buyers and with people that can put your products on the shelves or get them into some kind of direct to consumer or some kind of 3PL or QVC, you go in with some confidence.
So now diving into that just a bit more. So you're getting into kind of the food and beverage industry, or at least with one of your startups. And so what kind of data do you go and get? And I mean, I think people are familiar
Mhm.
with, you go to Walmart and they have your little checkout, your account, or you can now get the app. And so, hey, they can kind of see what you're buying and how much you're buying in that. But if you're
Mhm.
taking a typical startup or a small business, if you're in the food and beverage industry, what kind of data are you looking at? Is it who your customers are, industry data, all the above, or kind of how do you even go about getting that information?
Yeah. So again, I mean, there's a lot of data out there, obviously. So you have to be very strategic on what your sales strategy or your market activation is. So understanding that first and foremost, say I want to go to, and just for instance, I want to do Walmart, Target. All right, great. So you want to go to Walmart and Target. So then you can lean into the companies that have all this data. It's like they're the gatekeepers, and it's not cheap. At the same time, I've not paid for it before, and it's bit me in my you know what because we're like, oh, we don't need that. We can go figure it out. It saves a ton of time, ton of effort, and it just helps on the front end. So say you got Walmart and Target, great. Then you can lean into spins. Again, it's an industry based. Uh, it pulls all the analytics. So what it's going to do is it plugs into the Walmart and the Target system. And it's saying, all right, here's what you're selling in what category. So, for instance, we're bakery and then we're sweets. So
Hmm.
it'll pull the entire bakery. These are all the sales in the bakery, all the different companies and brands that are selling in the bakery. And then it'll break it even farther down to how many SKUs they're selling and why, and then in which regions, and then it'll give you price comparisons. It'll give you cost per ounces. It gives you all this data, so okay, great. I've got this cool product. I know it can be competitive. Can I be price competitive? Which regions can I be competitive in, and why? It's just a ton. It can get a little overwhelming
Hmm.
because you can really, I mean, you can go down even farther. And the more you pay, the more data you get, which is, I think, is kind of stupid, especially for startups. Startups are trying to get off the ground, and it's like, man, I don't have 50, $100,000. For instance, like a company like Pepsi, they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars a year on data, and
Hmm.
it takes it all the way down to, okay, great, now I know which region. Then it starts breaking it down even farther to, okay, I'm in this region, then I get to the city, and then I can start getting to individual consumers if you're willing to pay for the bigger quote unquote package. So
Now,
they
just out of curiosity, so let's take a lot of the listeners, the audience are going to be startups and small businesses. They may not have got it, they may not have started selling in Walmart or Target because you have to
yep,
get some traction and get in their system and convince them that you're worthwhile, so to speak. Can
yep.
you, if you wanted to, and I get it, it can be an investment, not all or businesses or have that out of the front, but can you go and just simply buy that data from them, even if you're not in their stores, or how do you go about even accessing it? Or
Yeah,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
you mean, yeah, like going directly to say, hey, I want this data for, yep, absolutely. They're a business just like any other business.
Hmm.
So you go in and they're going to say, and again, it's not cheap. I mean, if you want some of that higher end data, you're talking, you can talk anywhere between 10 grand and $30,000. So they'll sell it to you, and then you have to sign, excuse me, uh, quote unquote contracts that you're not going to share it, because they want to make sure that they can sell it to somebody else as well. So yeah, you could go to it right now, spins.com, and say, I want this data, and they'll gladly sell it to you.
I'm sure they'll gladly also take your buddy along with that.
That's exactly right, baby.
So now one of or kind of along those lines, but shifting gears just slightly, kind of, or one of the other things that we talked a little bit about was kind of that getting those initial sales contacts. And that can,
Hmm.
again, mean a lot of different things. And sometimes it's a direct to consumer and it's one by one, or you get an online presence. And other times it's, B2B and you're getting contacts within different industries. And so, I know that it's a broad question, but how do you even go about figuring out who you should be contacting or what those initial sales contacts should be or who you should
Hmm.
approach? And I know that's a very broad and vague question, but this
Yes.
kind of gives us some insight as to people are starting out, how you think about that.
Yeah. So, we call it an RM, we call it a market activation. So it's really understanding your products, your SKUs, what your pack sizes are, in what flavors or whatever, right? Like again, I mean, this can be any industry pretty much. And then from there, it's like, okay, typically with CPG, because I'm just going to use CPG because that's been most of my experiences. You want to own your hometown, then own your region, and then go national, right? And by putting this market activation together, part of it is saying, okay, within my hometown, we have these 5 retailers, and then within our region, we have these 20 retailers, and then within the scope of the United States, there's 100, right?
Hmm.
So it's identifying who those are first, and then I do a lot. I involve myself in a lot of communities, a lot of CPG communities, a lot of founder communities, a lot of investor communities. If you're doing that stuff already, it's pretty easy to go to those communities and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Who's got some leads? And then a lot of times you're going to get some leads off the front. And now you're going to have to go do the work. You're going to have to get in front of them. You're going to have to, get your product in front of them and so on and so forth. The hometown stuff is a little easier. Most of them you can walk into and say, "Hey, I got a cool product," and it'll direct it to where you need to go. What I've learned is that it it's not always fun to go out and do some of that cold call stuff and do even some of the warmer lead stuff. I mean, it can be a little intimidating.
Hmm.
Most people out there are willing to and want to help you and your brand succeed, which is pretty cool, at least that I found. So, again, it's identifying exactly who you want to go after, why. Use LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn Sales Navigator a ton because you can type in, I don't, Devin, where are you located in the country?
I'm located in Utah, just north of Salt Lake City.
Utah. Okay, so what's one of the bigger grocers over there?
That'd
You
be a
got
good question for
you
my
got
wife to ask.
Safeway,
I'll go with
Kroger,
Walmart, Smith's, Albertsons.
Albertsons. Say Albertsons. You can go into Sales Navigator and you can type in Albertsons buyer, Albertsons procurement, Albertsons um, category manager, anything that's associated with somebody that's buying something, and it's going to pull up just a ton of people you can potentially contact with as well. So that's been a huge tool
Hmm.
as well. A lot of data's out there. I mean, if you do enough digging, you're going to find something. And what I've done too is if I have a few buyer leads, and I want to get to more of them, because there could be upwards of 100 buyers within a certain grocery store chain, which is crazy.
Hmm.
You have their email, not their personal email, like their name and stuff. The back end, say it's at Safeway.com or at Jewelosco.com. You can back into a lot of leads just by sourcing. Oh, I know how this person's email reads. This person works for the same company, James.Smith at Safeway, whatever it is. I've backed into a lot of leads that way and a lot of conversations.
Hmm. Interesting. So, to a degree, cold, or I'll say lukewarm calling. So, doing a bit of research rather than just simply blasting everybody
Mm-hmm.
has been fruitful. Now, one of the things that you touched on that I think is great is there's a difference. You can find the contacts, and now you have to figure out how to network with them. So you find out who you should start reaching out to, whether it's Sales Navigator, whether it's you go knock door to door if it's a small town, or anything in between. But now, how do you go about networking with them, or how do you go about establishing that connection? Because I would assume, but you can correct me where I'm wrong, that you're going to go out and you're not necessarily going to have a lot of connections, at least when you get started with whether
Mm-hmm.
it's the Walmart or the big buyers or the small buyers. And so, how do you even go about establishing that connection with them so that they want to buy from you?
uh, do a little bit of research on the company that they work for. Find out what their hot buttons are, and what I mean what their hot buttons are. Like there's a lot of different companies and how they work. In grocery, for instance, you got high end, you got your mid tier, and then you got your lower end. Well, what's important to them? Like we have a local company here called Sendix, and what's important to them is giving back to the community, making sure that they have minority based businesses. They're always looking for certain shout outs, organic or just whatever, right?
Hmm.
Knowing what's important to them, being because they're the customer, goes a long way in for you to be able to align your pitch on the front end. It's like, hey, I'm really looking forward to working with Sendix. I know you guys have these initiatives. These are some of the brands that we work with, or I'm a brand that's got X, Y, and Z. Or if you're working with other brands, these are some of the brands I work with that align with what you're doing. Love to get you some samples, and then use something been learning to do is use open-ended questions. You
Hmm.
know, it's not like, hey, would you like to get on a meeting? No, right? It's like, what would I have to do for you to be able to talk to me a little bit more? The open-ended stuff goes a long, long way. And at least it gets them to open up.
Hmm.
Most of the time, 95% of the time, I don't get any response on my first two touch points. So,
Following that up just a little bit, because I think there are some great there are piece of advice now. When you're doing that, it feels like a little bit maybe a chicken and the egg. Now you can help me figure out which one came first, but until you get it, you can do some research on their website, kind of about the business in general. But until you get in and start talking with the
mhm.
individual, you're only going to be able to do so much homework. Now, certainly it makes sense to do that homework, but then to prepare in order to prepare or for that now or for that meeting, you need to know that those things ahead of time, and you're not going to know those things until you get in and meet with them. So is it a multi-round going back and forth with them, or do you just have to be as prepared as you can, or doing it on the fly, or some or all the above, or kind of give us some ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you obviously want to be able to do as much research as you can. Don't fill your brain. I'm the kind of person, if I fill my brain with too much, I won't remember any of it. So give yourself a few bullet points. Okay, I know they like the X, Y, and Z. Maybe do a little research on the person that you're going to talk to as well. And then to your point, you really never know where the conversation is going to go. It could go any direction. They might I mean, by the time you get to them, maybe they're having a great day. Maybe they're not having a good day. It's just there's a lot that can go into it. You just got to go out and do it, and then take some lumps while you're out there. Because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So if you're feeling a little weird, if your intuition's like, man, this is uncomfortable, you're probably doing the right thing. Obviously, that's the way I look at it. That's my gut telling me to keep going. And the more you do it, obviously, the easier it gets. You
Hmm.
take notes, you learn, you start connecting with people. It's about building relationships, though. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want to just push product down somebody's throat, because there's more products and more companies than these retailers want to work with. So unless you're able to build a relationship on the front end, you know, it's just not gonna work. And you got to be patient.
Hmm.
6 to 18 month sales cycle within grocery CPG.
So now, just there, kind of to follow up on that. So you were to, the conventional, I don't know, conventional wisdom, but at least what you are typically hear is, or the first impressions are the most, important thing, and yet you have 6 to 8 to 12 to 18 months or whatever long sales cycles. And so
Hmm.
is this one where if you get out there, you take your lumps. If it doesn't go well in the first meeting, you should give up. And because it wasn't the first impression, or do you keep trying and nagging and circling back, or kind of, any thoughts as far as how you get through that much longer sales cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it's always about follow up. I mean, no doesn't necessarily mean no. Again, they might be having a bad day, or something might be going on, and they're just insanely busy. Typically, from what I've been reading and people I've been talking to, 7 to 10 touches, especially with in the buyers are getting younger, and it's more about analytics now and less about um, it just takes more touches. It just takes more touches. So 7 to 10. So you can't necessarily give up. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur in general, those words should be completely removed from your dictionary. It's not give up, it's pivot and learn what you've learned, and get around some people you can ask some questions who have done it, and continue to network and make more contacts, and just keep going. I mean, sales is a numbers game at the end of the day. Relationships, I don't want to call relationships a numbers game. At the same time, you're going to connect with some people and you're not going to connect with others. So you'll find that out pretty quickly, and then you'll find your own style and what works, and how it works, and then you can duplicate it from there. You can duplicate it, because most grocery stores, at least, and again, I keep going to grocery stores because that's kind of what I know. Most grocery stores are going to operate 75% the same way. It's just that 25% differentiation. Totally said that wrong. That you need to figure between each one, so you can go in with a couple pointed bullet points of conversation.
Makes perfect sense. Now, kind of shifting gears slightly, but I think goes along with a lot of what you shared is, so now if you're to go and say, okay, doing all of these things, at some point, a lot of time especially if you're just starting out, it just may be you or a very small team, or it's you and your
Mhm.
friends or family or that, and you get going. And then as you continue to build, eventually, if you're successful and get traction, you start to build out that team of teammates or employees and that. And how do you kind of go about discerning or figuring out who should be on that team and what roles to fill and what should come first and what should come last? Or any thoughts on kind of as you've gone through it before, how you build out that team?
Yeah, I mean, do it. I mean, because this can always be a tough one, right? Like, do it as I don't want to say as slowly as you can, meaning, make sure that there's more work and sales coming in than you can handle before you start adding. Because once you start adding, obviously that's going to cost you money, and you're going to need to hire or compensate people in some way, shape, or form at the end of the day. So, if you built your foundational structure well enough to know that, hey, I need once we're at X sales, I know I need to do, bring in this person, bring in that person. I mean, the most important person for us, or at least I've always seen, is somebody who can help on the financial side of things. So we're not sitting behind a desk and inputting invoices. If that doesn't keep you out in the market, that doesn't keep you out in front of your customers, that doesn't keep you innovating, that doesn't keep you in operations. So that's always a number one. Try and find somebody to help you with the financing and um, operations. Obviously comes after that, and then once you've got a lot of traction, sales is typically the last thing that gets hired. Sales and marketing are typically the last two things that I've seen, at least, that come into play as far as hiring, and because most of the traction should have been done by the founders before. And when I say marketing, I'm not talking about making sure you're positioned and you got a story and all that and your packaging. Like, that's a different aspect of marketing. The marketing of when you're in the grocery stores, what does it look like? The social media, just all of that kind of marketing. That's probably one of that, and sales are the last two things that I've typically seen get hired.
Well, definitely some great pieces of wisdom, a lot of expertise shared, and some great takeaways. And with that, we're already starting to get towards the end of the podcast, and it feels like we're just starting to
Well,
scratch the surface. But as we do wrap up this episode, I always like to wrap up with the same question. So we're going to jump to that now, which is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
I'll live and die on this one. The biggest myth is you cannot scale a product that doesn't have a specific gross margin out of the gate. Meaning you can't go in with a negative and hope to get the volumes. You can't start in CPG. You want to have a 60% gross margin, and if you do that, you should be okay. Anything below that, it's gonna get a little dicey. 50, okay, maybe 40. You're in the 30s and you're hoping to get it with volume. You're probably not going to get there.
Hmm. Well, I think that's definitely a great myth to dispel, and some great information to learn from. So, well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, so you go to, obviously, find me on LinkedIn, Gary Plassmeyer. I'm probably the only Gary Plassmeyer on LinkedIn. I would assume. I haven't looked. I'm going to check that out today, actually. And then you can find me you can email me at info@reinventcpg.com. That's info@reinventcpg.com. Happy to answer any questions. We're always looking to, work with other founders and grant them the wisdom of getting our butts kicked in the market and help any way we can.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make some new connections. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Gary, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend.